Hello everyone, and welcome to today's last advanced tutorial sessions. Today we are going to talk about the framed walls. Just as you can see on my screen, I have prepared a small example to talk about the details, and then I will show you how to build up something. Now today we will focus on the walls, but I will show you also possibilities that you can set up with the roof and the slab as well. So now what we see on this screen now is a very simple example with a few basic things that are usually in a structure like this. Like there is the wall, there's like a concrete flooring and a concrete kind of fundamental thing that you can see on the bottom. Sorry for that. Let me just quickly close this chat window at the bottom. So what you can see now is an example to that. Let's see if everything can hear me clearly. Please give me a feedback in the chat. If something is wrong, send me a message, but I think everything should run smooth. So now what you see is a very simple wall on top of the foundation, and there are doors and windows with lintels and all sort of beams and wooden structure, and also there is a slab above that, and there is a wooden structure for the roof, as you can see here. So now I will talk about things how you can set up in the software using a few examples to this. Let me also load another project which is a larger example to the same thing, and that was designed by a Norwegian designer who created this. This actually is a larger building with the same structural details, as you can see. And also, well, actually, I will show you how to see the details on top of the current layers, because now what we have here is on the building. But if I select something, like for example this wall, you will see the structure nested within. If I select the other here, you can see lines that represent the framing. But actually there is another sort of representation type in the software that you can use when you would like to represent something either with the real sort of layers, or only with the structure. So let me show you how to do that. If you have a model like this and you have frame structure in it, the option that you should go for is in the build 3D model option here at the bottom of the screen, and there you will find something called the wall framing visible only. So this is a kind of a true-false switch that you can turn on, and then when you hit OK, then the software will kind of regenerate the model, but now representing only the wooden structure. So it actually does not change the structure, it is just simply removing the layers on top of this wooden structure. So now you can see that everything here is nice and detailed as much as it was designed. Also the roof is connecting with the proper structure to the walls. Well, the roof is actually represented still with layers, and it's because this switch that I show you, it only has an effect for the wall structure, not the rest of the building structure. But if I go into the details of this roof, for example, and I show you where you can set those up, you can see that actually for this roof you have an option to turn on the eaves purlin, middle purlin, rafter, and so on. Well, in this specific case this was not turned on, but you can also turn those settings on, just as it was used in the other case. Let me show you that. The first one, in this case this roof, as you can see, it is a roof I selected. It has all those details nicely detailed, the rafter, the color beams, and the ridge board. And in this case nothing else, but you can add any other details like the battens, roof tiles, and also other things. Well, we have a detailed webinar about how to design a roof and how to turn these things on and off and how to manage those, so I won't go deeper into this setting, but at least you have a general concept of how this works in relation to this topic. Today we are going to talk about the walls. So the building that I will use today is actually building a sample building that I've got from a manufacturer who designs framed wall structure. They actually have a factory, and they invited us to see how it was built. And actually, these buildings are built in one day with prefabricated walls and things like that. But other than that, the software actually is working in the same way. If you have a kind of like a wall that you build on site, or a wall that is kind of created previously in a factory. Now, the reason this company designed their panels also in the software is because the software is able to host these things inside the regular layer system, and they could create their own styles and use them regularly during their design. So when they are with the client, they could use their ready-made prefabricated styles that you can do, and you can set up for all sort of walls in the software, even with the framing. I will show you that. So what we see here on the screen, we actually have all those beams inside the layer system. And as you can see, there are all those beams and columns inside the exterior walls and also in the partition walls. And well, today I will build up a partition wall completely. So I will show you how you can create the layers and how you can nest the framing inside, and how you can position those inside this wall structure. But before I do that, let me show you something with a wall that has a door and a wall and a window at least. So let me go into the details and show you how this looks like. Now, in the software you have two main options when we talk about the structure and the layers of the wall. The first one regarding the layers is in the edit compound walls option. If you open that up, you can see this layer system, and there is in this wall actually there's 5 layers, and there's one which is the most important layer. This is usually the core layer, and this is actually what will host the framing itself. You can select any of these layers in the software, and you can tell that this is the displayed layer, and this way you can set up which one will host the framing system. So the reason why the framing is in this specific layer with the thickness of more than 15 centimeters is because this is indicated to be the displayed layer, and then the wall framing is designed accordingly. Everything here is set up to match the design of this specific manufacturer's structure that was created previously and saved into a style. Now let me show you how to create something like this, and for the reason for this topic I will actually just move on to the side here, and I will just create a regular wall, and I will show you how you can progressively change one single layer wall into a multi-layer wall, and then embed those framing details into that. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is that I draw a wall. This will have, well, I will use a very simple one. In this case, I will just use one with 100mm layer wide, and I will just draw, I don't know, like a 4-meter long piece, and then I will just place a door and a window into that, so I will be able to see all the details around the door and around the window and above and below the window when I design this system. So for that purpose, I will place a door, for example, to here. The opening direction is not that much important, and I will place a window somewhere here. Well, I will use a smaller one. I think I will use something like this, for example. it's a little bit thinner, and I will change its default distance from the wall line, and that will be actually in the left hand side. I can see that it should be 0 because now it is hosted in a partition wall. Well, let me just change the length a little bit more so we can see the regular beams and columns later. And we have a door and the window, and let's just go and set up the details. Now this wall will be in this specific case will be a partition wall which has the main layer. It will actually have thermal insulation, and on the two sides I will just use some sort of plasterboard or something like that. So I will just go into the details and I start detailing it. So let's just say that I have 2 more layers. I will insert 2 more layers into this one. I will set up the most important layer which will host the framing. So I just select it and I set up displayed layers. See that this tiny arrow is actually jumped from layer 1 to layer 2. And I will also set up the materials. Now this material will be the one that will be represented when you create the 3D section and you see those materials on the rendering. So and there is another setting for the hatching, so I will show you both. The first thing, I will use something like thermal insulation. I should look for that in the whole library instead of the in model library. So I think I will go with this one. And then I will go with material on the 2 sides. Instead of brick, I will use something like plaster or something like that, or bright white, whatever. It will be used as a plasterboard, so I will just use these 2. And then, well, I forgot to set up the function. The function is important because this is what determines the importance of layers when a multi-layered wall is connected. So this function determines that usually core layers are connected to core layers, and lower priority layers are either bumping onto the core layer, or more important layers, or they just they just won't make connections to the other side because there is a more important layer in between them. So I will just set this up to a core layer, and as this actually is a gypsum board or something like that, I will set this up as a substrate layer. So there is this setting here. There's nothing much of a change here on the right hand side. There is a tiny interactive preview, but as I did not change the thickness and I did not change the fill pattern yet, everything is as default. So I will just change the thickness first. The thickness on both sides should be around, I think the original design was around 18 millimeters and 18 millimeters. I'm trying to replicate the one that we saw on the drawing. So as you can see now, it has changed. And then, well, the base offset determines of where these layers are linked to. So usually, in case of a layer like this, in case of a structure like this, the core layer is connecting to the top of the structure, which is TS, top of structure. You can actually edit all those constraints, and you can see a nice helper dialog here at the right hand side. And many times, not always, but in some cases, when the structure is like this, which I designed, this the other 2 layers, the covering layers, are actually not going down to the structure, but they are actually usually added later on when there is this finish floor. So I will just link them to the finish floor, this one also, and the other one too. This will be also linked to the finish floor. Yeah, and also the same goes for the height. This I can change as well. Now I leave them on default, but you have similar options, and you can use this helper guide to be able to find a proper connection, and then the software will sort out how they are connected together. The reason I'm doing this is actually represented in another example. Let me just load that up. This is an example of an American structure. And what I'm going to do is this. I create those connections by telling the software that I'm going to rest this framing system on top of the load-bearing beams, that is the top of the structure, and then I will just land these other layers in case of this partition wall on top of the finished floor, wherever it should be on that specific level. It will automatically connect to the proper place. These what you can see here are pre-created in the American version of the software, and those are also saved in specific styles. So if you switch to the American version, you will be able to use these as well. And as you can see, all the connections, I will talk about these as well, all the connections are automatically sorted out. And should you if you actually need an extra beam or a column in this specific situation, you will be able to add that later on. But first we will talk about the rules that make up a wall like this automatically, and then we will talk about the specialties, the custom cases, when you need to perhaps add an individual item on your own. So let me just switch back to the first design, and I think I have only one thing to do, and that is the fill pattern. Now the fill pattern is the default stone wall fill pattern. So I will edit the first one, and I will just go to the pattern library, which is, by the way, a flexible library you can extend with your own library patterns if you want. I would just go with a regular dotted, whatever the original purpose is, pattern. So I can see that it appears here, and I will just do the same thing with the other pattern. This will be the same dotted pattern, and inside I'm going to create a thermal insulation, so I should change this stone wall from this pattern to something like this. This is what we use here in this region. Should you use a different one, you're free to pick up anything else. So I will just select that, and now everything is much better. I'm nearly done. Now let's just check whether it looks cool. See, this is how it looks like now. I'm happy with this result. And let me just check a few details here, because I just wanted to set up the same structure. So yeah, I just created those. Well, actually there are different values here, but by default, in general, these are all set up the same way. And well, actually here I made a mistake with this design. Actually, I forgot to set up the proper function. And if you see that now the core layer, which it's supposed to be the core layer, is not connecting with itself, because it is not prioritized. So it is not told to the software that this is more important than the rest. But if you just go here and you say that this is a core layer, then the software will sort it out. So this is why it's important to set up the core layer. Okay, so now this is what we have here, but now this time without the framing. So let me just focus on that and see how that happens. And before I do that, let me just focus on this little tiny detail here, so we can see while we further develop this, we will see the details later when I select this. Okay, now when I select it in the 3D, we can't see the framing because there is no framing inside. So if I go back to the details, I need to change the wall framing option here, and then I go to the details. Now, by default, the software has a default cross-section, a default material, a default setting for everything. So if I would like to change that, I'm free to do that. I only need to change the either the cross-section of the beams and the structural items inside the software. The default is a simple rectangle, but you can go with anything else. So you can go with a steel profile, an I profile, a C profile, a U profile, whichever you would like to use. Now I'm going to build up a wooden framing, but if you would like to design a different one with a different cross-section, you are free to go to the profile libraries of the software and just trying to find something else, like anything from this library or from the other libraries. And even you can also design your own cross sections. You can, there's a tool in the software that where you can save a 2D drawing and turn that into a profile, and then you will be able to browse that as well. We actually focused on that topic on different webinars, so I won't go into details regarding that. And also there is this this tiny paint bucket, which is for the material settings. So you have the cross section and the material settings. And well, actually the first page is an interesting one. It is copy properties. So what will that do? I will actually change a few of those details, and if I would like to copy properties of like materials or cross sections or something like that, this is what I will use. This is the copy properties page. It's a bit similar to the one that you use generally in the software when you copy properties from one design item that you have on the drawing already to another one. But in this specific case, this tool is built into this dialog, because the functionality of this dialog is so complex that actually this could be a different CAD just for designing the framing, but luckily it's built into the software. So the first thing that I'm going to create is the floor plate. So to be able to see that here, I just enable that option, and now I can see the floor plate. Now the floor plate has a cut inside, and it's because I'm actually changing the properties of an existing wall which already has a door, and there's the door. There will be the door when I finish this design. So that's why I actually design, usually when I create the framed wall details, I usually create I do it this way. I create a tiny piece and I insert a door and a window, so I will see during design, I will see that in this little preview as well. So I have a floor plate. Now if I just enable that and then I switch to that page, these are all the pages that you can design, then you have the option to change the cross section individually. You don't have to use all the same cross sections everywhere. You can change them according to their purpose, and you can even just use an offset. Usually what you can do with the structure is, at least you can set up the cross section, you can set up a material if that differs from the general settings. You can turn on or off the visibility, and you can also set up an offset. I will talk about that later. So let's just add the top plate, a wall stud on the left and the right, and this is what we will end up. So now I have a wall with, in this specific case, if I remember well, it has a beach material. I would like to change that, so I will show you how to use the copy properties. And then I have all these same cross sections, but now in this case my cross section is a little bit thinner than the structure that I'm going to fill up with. So I also would like to change the cross section of these items. So what I will do, I will just go back to the copy properties, and I will change the generic cross section, which is now 40 by 90 millimeters. So I go to the modify profile option, and I just simply turn this off, and I say that the height of this cross section should be 100 millimeters. Okay, so now I have this preview updated, and when I click OK, now I have this updated, but only on this page. Nothing happened here because I did not actually pasted these properties to all of the items. And also I also need to change the material. I would like to use some sort of pine material everywhere, so I just changed this as well. And then now comes the part where I actually copy these settings. So I say that I would like to copy the cross section, and I would like to copy the materials to all of the other items that are available now. So I just copy and paste. And then now if I go here, first things first, I can see that the material has changed to this pine material. If you were looking at this tiny example, perhaps you saw a little change in the cross section. But if I go to the floor plate, now I can see that now it is 100 millimeter. The top plate is 100 millimeter in the width, and the wall stud and the on the left and on the right is also changed its cross section. So this is how you can use the copy properties option. And as you can see, the floor plate, the top plate is a bit similar, talking about the settings, but the wall stud has a few extra. Like for example, in case of a wall stud, as you can see it clearly on the 2D design later on, you can also change its properties and you can change how it looks like on the 2D as well. So if I would like to, for any reason, if I would like to make a change and change its settings, perhaps its line weight should be a little bit thicker than the default, or its color should be different. I can change those settings here as well, just as well with the line type as well. Also an important setting in some regions, those structural items that are intersected are sometimes marked with a cross, and that's what you can set up. That's what you can set up here. If in your region you don't have this cross, you can just disable this. But if you have, you can just keep it enabled. And also you can change whether it has a specific hatch pattern when you see it from the top or not. I would just go with the default settings, and then the rest is the same: the visibility in the 3D and the offset as well, just as well with the wall stud. So now let's see what is an inner stud. Well, actually, all these letters here are there for your understanding with this little thumbnail here, which is actually a drawing. So you can actually use the same controls with your mouse. You can just pan that, you can zoom in, zoom out to see it a bit more clearly if that is a little bit small on your screen or something like that. So you can just use it as any other drawings. And now you can see that the floor plate, the top plate, the wall stud on the left and the right are all properly marked here. So if I would like to enable the inner stud, this is what we should see like in the regular field of this wall. So when I turn this on, they will be represented here and here a little bit. But actually nothing happens around the doors and the windows. So I should go forward, and for example, I should turn on the header. This is the header for the doors and the windows. I can also turn on the saddle, which or the sill, which is for the windows. It's at the bottom of the window. It's this is what when you measure the sill height of the window. This is where that value will be. And this is where it actually is placed. And also you can set up a jack stud. Now the jack stud in a few regions, it is not used everywhere, but in a few regions they are actually all there for strengthening purposes, and also for when the builders create the structure. This is where they actually insert the framing of the window itself, and this is where they drill the structure, especially if it's a wooden structure. This is where they make the connections with the building itself. Now, for example, in this case, it is important to set up a king stud. In case of the door, it is also represented. So this is the one that actually holds the doors and the windows. It creates a little bit more stability in the structure. And also there's a cripple stud, which is appearing at the top and the bottom of the openings. And also there is something called Noggin, and this is also creating an extra structural. It has an extra structural purpose to make this this whole wall a little bit stronger. So if there is some sort of certain power, it cannot, you know, distort the wall easily. In a few countries, these settings are not these items are not represented, or they are represented with a different cross section. So I will show you now how to use the same settings in case of an inner stud, a header or saddle, jack stud, king stud, cripple stud, and the Noggin. So let me just show you what you can do with an inner stud. Now this is a little bit more detailed than the previous ones, because it should have actually something like with a pattern, like the spacing pattern. So now what I can see here, I have a few options to set up the steps, like fixed step, uniform step, fixed step, centered, or something like that. So this is all all with the alignment of the structure itself. And then comes the other important part, which is with the spacing. So if you would like to change the spacing between now it's also important that you can change the spacing between the like the free space that is value d here, or you can also change the spacing between the axes of these items. So it's on you, whichever you would like to change, you can change, and the rest will be recalculated. So if I would like to change this to, I don't know, something like 800 millimeters, then when I click on redraw, the software created a different layout. And if I just click on 600 and I just update this this preview, then I can see it it is changing the layout as just as we could see previously. Also, you have similar options, just as in case of the left side wall stud and the right hand side wall stud. There's this setting for the line type, line weight, whether there should be a cross inside the cross section or not. It should be visible in the 3D. Now this option is actually an interesting one. You can disable the visibility for design purposes to see how things are represented, but in this case, if you do that, in the end, if you just forget to turn this back on, these things will be missing. So if you disable this to see the details a little bit better, you should turn this back on later on, so to be able to create the wall properly. Also, at any time you can disable the whole structure, just as here, as you can see. And this is also a good thing because the software allows you a non-destructive design. That means if you just would like to test something out, you don't have to erase the things. You just turn off the visibility, and later on then you can turn it back on. So all the settings stored with the header, with the inner stud are all kept. You don't need to recreate them all the time. So now that was the inner stud. The header is a little bit simpler. And in case of the header, in some countries you have multiple headers perhaps, and sometimes they are also on the thinner side. They're actually standing on the thinner side, and there is a multiplication of those. Now in that case, you can set that up. You can say that you have I don't know, 3 beams, and this is what happened. So I also need to turn their cross section. So I need to go here and I need to rotate this cross section, and when I say OK, and now I have 3 next to each other. So this is what happens in a few countries. You can do that as well. Also, the same goes for the saddle. I won't change that now, but as you can see, it has all the same options. You can set up the number of beams. You can also change the cross section if you would like to. And there is this jack stud, which is a bit similar to the wall studs on the left and the right hand side. So it has similar settings regarding the visibility in 2D and in 3D, and also the other things like the connections and the offset. I will show you an example to the offset a little bit later on. Okay, so the king stud is the one that is resting at the 2 sides of this door and window, but generally it has the same settings as the wall stud and on the left and the right hand side. And the cripple stud is because it has a certain pattern. It has similar setting to the inner stud. And just as well, as you can see, by default it has a little bit more dense spacing, but you can change it to your taste or to the local regulations. And in many situations it is actually centered, so there's one in the center, and then the rest is just spaced from the center. So I will just use that setting. And there is this Snogging. This is an interesting one because it has actually 2 separate settings for how it is laid out, and also you can set up different cross section, and you can change the height. So in a few regions they just do this, so everything is at the same level. And other regions they use it as an alternate nogging. Now in this case, it is usually because when they place it here, like let me just show you this example. So when they place it here, they have space to, you know, actually place it there using like drill it there using screws or other equipments to fix it from this side actually, and the other one is from the other side. So this is what you can do. This is how you can change it, and also you can change its elevation. And also, if you would like to, let me just change this elevation to, I don't know, like 600 millimeters. So this is where it rests now. And if you would like to add an extra, you can do that by clicking on this one, and then you can just change its height to, I don't know, 1,300 millimeters. So, and you can just keep going and adding more and more and more of these. So wherever, in case of these items, you can see an extra tiny green cross at the top, that means you can actually add multiple layouts, multiple sets to this same wall structure, which helps a lot, especially when you would like to create, I don't know, like two columns next to each other in two separate layers. I will show you another example to that, why that's important and how you can handle that. And in a case of bracing, if you would like to have that, as you can see, this is the bracing. If you would like to have that, you can turn that on, and you can change the settings for the bracing easily by changing this AB and HT values and HB values. This is what you can do. Here you can either decide to set up this value or the other one. And if you don't need that, or if you just would like to change its cross-section to something smaller in a few regions, they do that, or with a completely different cross-section or something like that, you can do that, or you can just disable that if you don't have with that specific wall framing that you actually design at that specific building that you are about to create. Okay, so well, now what I created is more or less the same that we had in the previous session, except the nogging. So I will just remove this secondary nogging, which I created at the lower region. So I just moved there and I erased that. And now it looks pretty much similar to that one. And then if I would like to save this wall structure with its layers, with its framing, into a style, I can do that easily. I just click here and I say, okay, I just would like to create a new one, my wall with framing or something like that. Well, actually this is a partition wall, and I can save it to the frame construction folder, for example, or I can create a subfolder even, and I can decide whether I would like to make this available only in this specific project or in all of the projects on this computer. So I will go with this option, and I say okay and okay. So now, as you can see, all these items appeared according to my settings, and if I go to the 3D and I just select it, I can clearly see this in the 3D. And again, if I go to the 3D hammer, build up 3D model, turn on the visibility only of the layers, only the framing, I would see that as well. But now there is another topic I would like to show you, and that is with the connections and the extra stud that or column that perhaps you would like to place into this this building. I mean, into this wall structure. So what happens if I would like to connect walls like this? Let me just create similar to this one. First here, and then another one. For example, let me just change the layout to the right side and like this. Okay, so I will show you a T connection and an L connection, how that works. Now both are available at the top here, just as well with the rest of the walls. So if you would like to create a T connection between this item and this item, the software will automatically solve it, and it will automatically make up the connections between the layers, and it will also automatically find the structure and place an extra stud at the end, so you will be able to connect them together. Also, the same thing happens here at the end. If I use an L connection and I just connect this and this, Now, because I use the nail connection, all the walls, all the wall layers are nicely bending around the corner, and the end studs, the wall, the left wall stud and right wall stud, should we talk about one or the other, are also aligned together. So this is how actually in this specific case this wall will look like when they build it on the side. Well, what happens if I would like to, for any reason, for example, if I would like to add an extra here? Now I could do that with the rules as well. So I could go to the wall rules and change the settings to match this specific purpose. But sometimes it is just much simpler to use the regular column tool. If you just use the column tool, you can go with any sort of cross sections that you find here, or you can actually also customize the column cross sections. So what I will do now, I just click here with the right mouse button, I click on property, and then I will just find the cross section setting here. Now this is the cross section with a width of 50 and the height of 50, and I believe I used 40 by 100, so I will just do that here as well. So I will just change this to 40, and I will change the height to 100. Oh, that's too much. So like that, and well, because now I will place this manually, I can, you know, set up the reference point which I will pick up, and by that reference point I will just place it on the drawing. I will use this one at the left bottom corner because I think now it will be much easier to handle that. And then now there is another extra setting which I will show you now, which is now disabled on purpose, so that I can show you how that works. So now when I hit OK, I can just use the column tool and then just place this right next to this column here as well. So now there is one thing that regarding the 3D and the 2D together is not correct here, and that is actually this column is now not nested into this wall. As you can see, when I select this wall, this column is not selected, and also unfortunately the thermal insulation and the stud is kind of intersecting each other. They are the stud should not have this thermal insulation here. So that is actually an option that is by default on in the software, so you don't have to turn it on. I just turned it off in this project to be able to represent what that makes. So when I select this this stud and I use this option, which is the insert into wall, then that will actually solve that. So now when I select the wall, this stud is also selected. So when I change the wall, if I move the wall, this stud will also move with that as well. So again, this is by default on. You don't have to do what I did now. I just turned this off to be able to represent how that works. So this way you can actually add any sort of extra structural item into the wall, and you're free to distribute any individual studs into this this wall structure that you have created previously. Now, an interesting thing also with this is that if you have a wall like this, you have one extra option which is specified for this specific wall type, and that you can find in the local menu, which is, by the way, available here in this floating menu, or you can just right click on the wall and that brings up the same menu. So this here is actually the same with the right mouse button. And then here you can see a few options for this wall to edit the wall, edit the layers, change the one side or the other, change the layers, make connections, and so on. And now the one that I'm willing to use is the is actually, just a moment, I'm willing, yeah, it's here, it's in the accessories, and that is the place wall framing front of you. This is a specific one for this one, this framed wall. As you can see, I should have changed the length of the column, which I can do later at any time. And now I have this structural design which I can use for documentation purposes. I can add dimensions or annotations or whatever. So now I can create the documentation of this wall structure. Let me just quickly go through whether I've forgotten something or not. So we have talked about the 3D representation of the walls. There is this one option that you can use globally in the software to turn off the visibility of the wall framing. Turn off the visibility of the layers and show only the wall framing, or represent the whole structure as it is. And this was this option. Also, I've talked about how you can set up the structure, how it where the framing goes into, and also you could see how to actually connect those items, how to set up the cross sections, the materials, and also the distribution rules. And I also wanted to show you one important thing regarding these settings, and that was the offset. I mentioned it a few times, but I actually did not show you what that means. Now I will further develop this specific wall here, and I will show you what that means. If I go into the details, let me show you one thing first, so you will understand this much better. If I go into the compound wall settings and I change this display layer option here from the core layer to another one, then this is what will happen. See, the framing is automatically jumping to that specific layer which I told to, which is okay, but it will make sense when I would like to create a layer that has an offset for framing, and I would like to completely change it. So now what I just go back and then I change the settings. Now what I would like to do, I would like to split this core layer into two smaller layers by adding a new one and setting the thickness to half the original. Yeah, like this and this. And for example, this one will be cavity or something like that. Yeah, this will be this one. And I also changed this to have no hatch like this. And yeah, well, the rest is fine. I just wanted to split that layer up. And this is also a core layer, but it is a secondary core layer. And when I just do this and I don't do anything else, this is what will happen. See, now again, the framing jumped to the first core layer because that is the indicated layer. Unfortunately, you cannot go here and say that you have two indicated layers. That would make no sense. But what you can do is to solve this in the framing level. The framing can have something what we call an offset. Now, in case of the offset, well, I don't want to offset these things one by one. So I actually would like to copy the offset property to all of the framing, and I will use this option. But before I do that, let me measure the distance what I have to use, and this distance is, I believe this should be 25 millimeters, but let's just make that sure. It is the distance from here to here. Yeah, that is 25 millimeters. So I go back to the settings of this wall, and I go to the wall framing, and I use the copy properties first page, go back to the bottom, use 25, and I copy this property to all these existing structure, redraw. So, no, I'm sorry, copy, and then it actually is updated. Let's just go and say okay. So now it is fixed. As you can see now, everything is 25 millimeters shifted to the left because I use that value. Actually, you can also use a negative value if you need to. In a case like the additional extra layers on the other side or something like that, so you can use a positive or a negative offset value as well. So this is actually what I wanted to show you regarding the this framed structure. And at the end, as an extra, I would like to also show you an interesting historical example. This is also with a framing, as you can see, but when we designed this for a museum here in Budapest, we actually did not have the framing system yet, and we actually used something called railing. Railing is also a cool tool if you would like to have something that is very, very specific and very, very uneven, irregular. well, in this case, even if we would have the framing system, this is just so irregular. Everything is having a certain regular, I mean custom distance, custom cross section, and so on. So we decided to use the railing. The railing, you can actually just put it on a layout, and you can just literally design how it looks like. And this is what we used here. This was a fun project. It was a very interesting one to design, with all this existing visible framing. It's a Roman building, an ancient building here in Budapest. So I just wanted to show you a historical example where we actually use the wall framing, but with a different tool in the software. I just wanted to highlight the flexibility of the software, that what you can do with other tools as well. And at the end of today's session, I also would like to, before the questions, I see that you have a few questions coming up. I also would like to show you another tool, which is the grid design, when you would like to design buildings following a specific grid that you would like to place on the drawing, and then you would like to control what happens by controlling the grid. Which is also a very powerful tool in the software. So let me just open up this example that I had here. So this is where we ended. Let me just save this, and then I will just open up a new empty drawing, and I will show you how the architectural grid works. So let me just open up a new project like that, and I still have a few minutes, so I will be able to do that. I just go back to well, this thing that you can place is in the drafting tools and grid lines. Now the grid lines, just as any other item in the software, has a default setting. Now you can either right click here and you can set up the property, or you can go to the drafting properties, and there you go, you can find the grid line settings. But both does the same. You can set up in advance what you would like to design. So I just go here, right click, grid lines place, right click property, and then I just set up the structure of it. You can set up the color, you can set up the lines, line type, whether this is a rectangular or a radial grid, the text style, where it is represented. Now by default the software will represent this grid on all the floors, and also you can set up the prefixes, the signs, and so on. Now I will just create something with for example 9 by 9 horizontally and vertically, and when I hit OK, I just place this grid line, this grid structure. And now what I see here is more than just a drawing. These are actually grid lines that when you control them, you can change their sign, you can change how the software builds up the structure. Now for that I actually need to place at least a few columns and beams. So let's just go to the building, and I will just go with the default column, which is rectangular 30 by 30, and I will just place it falling somewhere here, but using the central point. So I will just hit F5 a few times. When landing at the center, I just place it here, and then now when I placed it here, now the software actually knows that I placed it into A1. So when I, for any reason, for design purposes perhaps, I change the grid how it is represented, I will do that. The software will actually understand that it should also move this structure. It should not just change the grid, but it should also move the structure. And the thing for that is actually the software understands that when you place an item like this, it is placed into the intersection of these two items. So now you have something that is connected to the A and the first grid line. Now let me just show you that we actually have this here. So when I move this, when I select this and I click here and say I would like to offset it a little bit, then as you can see it is jumping on the 2D and in the 3D as well. And also if I do something like rotation, that will also follow the changes. Let me just go back and just select these here, and I would like to multiply these. I would like to create 8 extra copies, so I just do that. Okay, and I pick the center point of this one, and let me just place it here. So even if you copy these, the software will understand that they are resting on top of these grid lines. So when you change the grid lines, it will automatically understand that, and it will follow the changes. Let me just remove these as well here. And let me just place a few beams as well. I will just move them from, let me just change the reference point to the center. We'll just again use F5, yeah, like that. And I'll just place 1 and 2, and I can also make copies of these. I should change the length in this case to match the other one. And I should also change their heights, perhaps to, well, I believe it's 2,700 or so. Yeah, that's not the length. I just changed it back, and I should change the elevation, the base elevation. This should be 2,700. Yeah, now it's much better. And I just would like to copy a few more of those, and again 8 extra from this point, from the center to the end, like this. Yeah, and now I did that so that I can show you what happens if I move this. For example, if I just move this again, I use an offset and just place it here. See, now the lengths of the beams and also the position of the columns are all changed. And if I do something like rotation, I just rotate this from this point to this one, for example, then the software will also stretch and change the location of these items. So now with this tool that you can find in drafting tools, grid lines, and you can place the grid itself, the grid system, and you can add extra grid lines as well. You can actually create a grid that is interactive with the columns and the beams. So when you create something like this concrete building structure or something like that, the software will create an intelligent structure that reacts to the grid and vice versa. Okay, so this is what I wanted to cover for today's session. And let's see if you had a few questions during this session. And I will just check the chat, what you sent me. Yeah, okay, so there is a vertical spacing. So there's a question if whether the noggins can not be set to a vertical spacing and link the repeat to the wall height. Well, unfortunately not. This is not possible. These are fixed values. So if I go to the let me just load up a structure like this, for example here. So if I have a noggin, and if I go to the wall framing, and I check this, I'm sorry, I don't have noggin, so this one. So as you can see, it is a fixed value that you can set up. Now this is in American, this is in feet and inches, so that's why you can see these values here. You can change the unit system, but as you can see, this is a fixed value. You don't have this edit value like in case of the layers of the software. So this is a fixed value. It cannot be linked to the top of the structure or the bottom of the structure. Also, well, actually, there was there are other questions, but those are regarding something else. So this was it. This was all about the structural systems of the wall framing. And as you could see, you can also store these into your own styles, and you can use them in later designs as well. And well, I did not touch that in my sessions, but actually, if you have these styles saved on your computer, you can also copy those styles between computers. So if you have any of those here, you can right-click on the styles, and you can just export or import all those into a certain file type, that when you move them to another colleague, or you just pass them over on a pen drive, they can just load it up, and they can import into their setting, into their libraries on that certain computer. So all those things with the styles are also available. I just wanted to highlight that because I think I did not touch that yet in my previous session. So this is what you can do with the framed walls. I hope you liked it, and I hope my examples were clear enough and easy to follow. There is a package that you can download next to this today's session, which has this sample project which I was working on. So if you would like to follow what I did by doing the similar steps, you can just do that, or you can just build it up from scratch, because this is actually what I did as well. And also, if you have a few extra questions later on when this event is already not live, if you watch it later, just send your comment below us in the comment section and we will answer you, or just send your email to info@ARCHLine.XP.com and we will answer your questions. If you like this content, please give us a thumbs up. And if you would like to see other sessions like this when they are aired, or if you would like to see our new extra features that are coming soon in the future, please just subscribe to our channel, so you will be able to see all those appearing in time. So thank you very much. I'm happy that I could show you these powerful tools, and let me know what you think of this tool in the software, either in the comment below or just send us an email. Thank you very much. Next time we will come with an interesting thing on live, so we will wait for you at the following webinar session. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Have a nice day.